The Fragmented Power of the Naga Insurgency, comparing the influence of NSCN-IM, NSCN-K, NSCN-KYA, and NNPGs across Nagaland, October 2025 analysis. The Naga political landscape remains one of the most complex insurgent networks in South and Southeast Asia. For decades, competing factions of the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, NSCN, have shaped the destiny of Nagaland's politics, identity, and peace efforts. As of October 2025, 4 principal organizations dominate the stage: the NSCN-IM, the NSCN-K, the NSCN-KYA faction, and the Working Committee of Naga National Political Groups (NNPGs). While all claim to represent the aspirations of the Nagas, their ideological priorities, operational geography, and public legitimacy differ sharply. The recent resurgence of the NSCN-KYA, after a drone strike by Indian forces in Myanmar, has once again highlighted how insurgent dynamics across the Indo-Myanmar frontier continue to shape Nagaland's internal balance. In this context, evaluating each faction's territorial and political influence across Nagaland's districts reveals both a fragmented insurgency and a deeply divided society, in which loyalties often align with tribe, geography, and history, rather than a unified nationalist cause. NSCN-KYA and the return of the frontier militancy. In mid-October 2025, Indian drone strikes destroyed a key NSCN-KYA camp in Lah Township, Sagaing Region, Myanmar. The attack, which reportedly killed 5 militants and injured a senior commander, was the most direct Indian military operation targeting the group since 2019. The NSCN-KYA's subsequent statement denouncing India's domination and oppression and vowing continued resistance underscores the faction's enduring militancy even after years of organizational decline. This faction, led by young Aung, the nephew of late Naga revolutionary leader SS Karplang, represents the hardline, uncompromising wing of the Naga struggle. Its cadres operate primarily along the Myanmar borderlands, particularly in La, Nanyun and Taga regions of the Naga Self-Administered Zone, SAS. From there, they conduct occasional operations or extortion networks reaching into Mon, Tuensang and Longleng districts of Nagaland. Despite its diminished manpower and loss of safe bases, NSCN-KYA continues to attract a small but ideologically committed following among younger Nagas in border villages who see India's military presence as occupation rather than protection. The group's joint attacks with ULFA-I and other northeastern insurgent groups such as PIPAK and PLA signify a return to a pan-northeast insurgent coordination reminiscent of the 1990s. The October 16, 2025 ambush on an Assam Rifles camp at Manmau, followed by the Kakapatha incident in Assam, demonstrated this coordination vividly. However, within Nagaland itself, NSCN-KYA's practical influence has declined sharply. Most Naga civil bodies, including the Naga Hoho, Eastern Nagaland People's Organization, ENPO, and church networks, now distance themselves from its ideology. Its armed operations are largely confined to cross-border territories rather than civilian control zones. By 2025, the NSCN-KYA commands roughly 10–12% of the overall Naga insurgent influence, concentrated mainly in Mon, around 25% local influence, Tuensang 15%, and Longleng 10%, with negligible reach elsewhere. The drone strike of October 2025 and the Indian government's 5-year extension of the ban under the UAPA Act have further eroded its urban networks and funding channels. Nevertheless, as long as Myanmar's frontier remains unstable and Indian intelligence cannot fully penetrate the dense forest corridors, the faction will persist as a symbolic thorn in the region's security framework. The legacy and decline of NSCN-K Karplang faction. Before his death in 2017, SS Karplang had built NSCN-K into a trans-border movement, uniting Nagas across India and Myanmar. But after his demise, the organization splintered, leaving multiple rival groups including the Young Aung faction and the so-called rebel, or original NSCN-K, once capable of negotiating directly with the Myanmar military and commanding respect across the Eastern Naga tribes. It now struggles with leadership disputes, resource shortages, and arrests of senior members. The Indian government's renewed ban on NSCN-K in September 2025 reflects its continued perception of the group as a violent organization. The Ministry of Home Affairs reported that between 2020 and 2025, 13 cadres were killed, 85 arrested, and 69 surrendered from various NSCN-K wings, underscoring how sustained counterinsurgency pressure has reduced its ranks. Yet its remnants remain active in cross-border trade routes and extortion rackets in eastern Nagaland. District-wise, the Kaplang faction's influence is now confined mostly to Mon and Tuensang, the two easternmost districts where Kaplang's legacy still commands moral respect among Konyak and Kayamniungan communities. The ENPO region, representing 6 eastern districts, continues to have sympathizers who respect Kaplang's advocacy for eastern Naga independence. However, politically, the group is now overshadowed by the NNPGs, which have taken a more pragmatic route through negotiations with Delhi. NSCNK's overall influence in Nagaland can be estimated at around 8%, with specific weight in Mon 20%, Tuensang 15%, and minor presence in Kifir and Longleng about 10% each. Elsewhere, its authority is negligible. Its military credibility has been replaced by sporadic criminal activity, kidnappings and arms smuggling, like the October 18, 2025 abduction of 2 laborers in Turap, which was foiled by the Assam Rifles. In short, the once formidable Kaplang faction now operates as a shadow of its past, a reminder of the insurgency's golden age rather than a living revolutionary movement. NSCN-IM, the dominant political and ideological power. The National Socialist Council of Nagaland, Isak Muiva, remains the most powerful Naga organization both politically and socially. Founded in 1980 under Thuengalang Muiva and Isak Kishi Swu, the NSCN-IM's vision of Nagaland, a unified Naga homeland across India and Myanmar, continues to define Naga nationalism's mainstream narrative. Though its armed capacity has diminished since its 1997 ceasefire with the Government of India, its political machinery, taxation networks, and administrative presence still dominate most of Nagaland's districts. The NSCN-IM controls or influences parallel civil administration structures through its Government of the People's Republic of Nagaland (GPRN), headquartered at Hebron Camp near Dimapur. This shadow government collects taxes from businesses, controls local permits in rural regions, and exerts soft power through religious, student, and cultural organizations. Despite public fatigue over its taxation system, the NSCN-IM remains deeply embedded in Naga life, especially in the Tangkhul, Ao, and Sumi belts. In 2025, Muiva's emotional return to his native Somdal village in Ukhrul after 50 years stirred massive symbolic enthusiasm. Social media, however, also revealed polarization. Many in Nagaland's heartland criticized the group as a Tangkhul army, reflecting resentment toward its Manipur-based leadership. Yet, even among critics, the organization's dominance remains uncontested. District-wise, NSCN-IM maintains overwhelming influence in Dimapur, Kohima, Mokokchung and Wokha, with significant administrative and financial penetration. In Phek and Zanhiboto, it competes with NNPG-affiliated local bodies, but still holds sway through its church and student wing networks. The group's long engagement in peace talks with Delhi, particularly the Framework Agreement of 2015, has granted it semi-legitimacy unmatched by any rival. By October 2025, NSCN-IM commands roughly 50–55% of the overall Naga insurgent political influence, making it by far the most dominant faction. It controls approximately 60% of influence in Dimapur, 55% in Kohima, 50% in Wokha, 45% in Mokokchung, and around 40% in Zanhiboto and Phek. Its dominance, however, is challenged by growing impatience among younger Nagas, who see its negotiations as stagnant and overly centralized under Aging leadership. NNPGs, the pragmatic coalition. In contrast to the ideological rigidity of the NSCN-IM or the militancy of NSCN-KYA, the Working Committee of Naga National Political Groups, NNPGs, represents a more pragmatic and decentralized approach to the Naga political question. Formed in 2017 with Delhi's encouragement, the NNPGs consist of 7 groups, including NSCN Reformation, NSCN Kolkatovi, and others who broke away from the main NSCN factions, seeking a realistic and inclusive settlement within India's constitutional framework. The NNPGs' negotiations with the Indian government have brought them growing support, particularly in Nagaland's tribal heartland, where people crave stability and development. In Tuensang, KYA and Peron, where fatigue from decades of insurgent taxation runs deep, the NNPGs have emerged as an acceptable political intermediary. Their leaders, especially Nkitovi Jamomi, maintain open dialogue with civil society and church bodies, promoting a rhetoric of reconciliation over revolution. In 2025, as the peace process remains stalled, the NNPGs have positioned themselves as the people's negotiators. While they lack the historical charisma of the NSCN-IM, their acceptance among traditional tribal bodies, like the Central Nagaland Tribes Council, CNTC, has given them grassroots legitimacy. District-wise, NNPGs wield strong influence in Zanjiboto 50%, FEC 45%, Peron 40%, and growing acceptance in Dimapur 25% and Kohima 20%. In the eastern districts, however, their reach remains limited due to the dominance of legacy insurgent structures. Their overall influence across Nagaland can be reasonably estimated at 25–30%, making them the second most influential bloc after NSCN-IM. Unlike other factions, the NNPGs operate less through armed means and more through negotiation and alliance building. They also benefit from quiet political backing from state-level politicians who prefer a settlement within India's federal structure. Many civil organizations, including the Nagaland Baptist Church Council, NBCC, increasingly refer to the NNPGs as the moderate voice of the Naga struggle. Comparative analysis, influence across Nagaland. While all these factions trace their roots to the same nationalist movement, their relative power now varies sharply across Nagaland's geography and society. The western and central districts, Dimapur, Kohima, Waka, Zanjiboto, Mokokchung, remain dominated by NSCN-IM and NNPGs, both of which have institutionalized their presence through negotiations and governance. The eastern frontier districts, Mon, Tuensang, KYA, and Naga, remain contested zones where remnants of NSCN-K and NSCN-KYA still exert fear-based influence through intimidation, though not broad popular legitimacy. In terms of popular influence, NSCN-IM % overall dominant in West and Central Nagaland. NNPGs % overall strong in Central and Southern districts. NSCN-K tilde 8–10% overall limited to eastern border areas. NSCN-KYA % overall operating mainly from across the Myanmar border. Together, these figures reveal a landscape where NSCN-IM and NNPGs collectively account for around 80% of Nagaland's insurgent political space, leaving only residual militant control in the frontier zones. Yet this fragmentation prevents a unified Naga political settlement. Each faction defines sovereignty, integration, and solution differently, one seeking shared sovereignty, another complete independence, and others special constitutional autonomy. The crisis of legitimacy and the road ahead. Despite decades of struggle, the Naga political movement is now caught between generational change and political fatigue. The October 2025 developments, the drone strike against NSCN-KYA, the renewal of the ban on NSCN-K, and the symbolic mobilization around Muiva's homecoming, reveal a paradox. On one hand, the Indian state is militarily confident and diplomatically firm. On the other, Naga factions remain trapped in internal rivalries, unable to present a united negotiating front. The Naga civil society, including church networks, student federations, and tribal councils, increasingly act as the stabilizing middle ground. These bodies are pushing for reconciliation among NSCN-IM and NNPGs to present a single peace front, but mistrust persists. NSCN-IM sees NNPGs as Delhi's political instrument, while NNPGs accuse NSCN-IM of monopolizing the Naga national cause. Meanwhile, the Eastern Nagaland Movement for Frontier Nagaland Territory, FNT, driven by the ENPO, has further fragmented unity. Eastern leaders accuse the NSCN-IM and NNPGs alike of ignoring their developmental neglect. This grievance provides limited oxygen to the NSCN-K remnants, though most eastern villagers now prefer negotiation over renewed war. As of late 2025, India's strategy appears to combine pressure and patience, drone strikes to neutralize hardliners, political engagement with moderates, and development packages to pacify border communities. The future of the Naga question, therefore, depends less on armed strength than on political adaptability. Among the insurgent factions, the NNPGs are best positioned to transition into a political platform within India's constitutional space. The NSCN-IM, though still powerful, faces the dual challenge of leadership agging and declining public tolerance for its tax regime. Conclusion: the distribution of influence in 2025. By October 2025, the balance of influence among the Naga factions can be summarized as follows. NSCN-IM remains the primary power center, exercising approximately 55% overall influence across Nagaland, strongest in Dimapur, Kohima, Waka and Mokokchung. NNPGs hold around 30%, emerging as the second most influential bloc, with legitimacy in central and southern districts like Zunheboto, Phek and Peron. NSCN-K retains around 8%, primarily in eastern Nagaland's Mon and Tuensang belts. NSCN-KYA, operating mostly from Myanmar, holds about 10–12% residual militant influence across the border zones. Together, they form a complex web of overlapping control and negotiation that defines Nagaland's contemporary insurgent ecosystem. Despite wanting militancy, no single group yet commands total legitimacy. The struggle that once united the Nagas under the banner of sovereignty has evolved into a contest of negotiation, relevance, and survival. Thank you for watching. Please do share this video. Also, don't forget to subscribe Zalangam Media.